Hey folks, it's Matt, aka Stormageddon. This is CPOV Autographs, and for the start of the new year, for 2022, I am going to be talking about my experience covering PAX Unplugged 2021 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was a ton of fun. For those who don't know, it is a board game convention, board game and tabletop. I had never been before. Friends of mine out in Philly, previous guests of this very show, Robert Prinebush and Katie Delaney, who live in Philly, have been wanting myself and my spouse Sarah to go for ages. And so I was lucky enough to get a press pass from PAX to cover the event. And what's to follow after this little intro is a series of interviews with game designers, publishers, creators, writers, fans, a bunch of folks who were gracious enough to take the time to chat with me. A bunch of them reached out directly to be on the show, which is always very exciting. And so I'm really excited to share those interviews with you, which we'll get to in just a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about the event, including getting to see some panels, like a live recording of an episode of Rivals of Waterdeep, a D&D actual play podcast / Twitch show that I love. With a ton of cool creators that I'm fans of, and some of which who I'm actually friends with, and it's always fun. I got to run into folks that I had been wanting to see for a while, including my friend Hareem, the incredible streamer Urban Bohemian, aka Brian Gray, who's been a guest on Screen Snark, and I also got to meet the incredible Mark Meir at the Rivals of Waterdeep live event. He is known throughout the TTRPG space, has been on a bunch of TTRPG shows of his own, and of course is the voice of Commander Shepard in Mass Effect and one of my favorite humans. I was honored to meet him. I honestly got tongue-tied because it's like meeting a hero, someone you spent so much time with in a video game. He was very kind, very generous with his time. He let me babble at him a bit, and so that was kind of one of the peak highlights of that event for the whole weekend, of course, and getting to talk to all of these incredible people that you're about to hear. I introduce everyone at the start of every clip. Something to know about this episode: I'm wearing a mask. Everyone is wearing masks so we could be in that space safely. So if things sound a little muffled, that's why we are all wearing masks. We are all using lots of hand sanitizers and being very careful, but I just wanted to let you know. This was also recorded before Omicron was as widespread as it is now. Would I have gone to a convention if that were the case at the time? Probably not. It's hard to say, but it was between December 10th to the 12th in December of last year. And again, it was great. I had a really good time. There are a lot of highlights I'd like to share, but honestly, I'd rather let these interviews speak for themselves. I just wanted to chat a little bit up top about it. I'm going to keep this shorter than I had originally planned because there's just so much episode here, so many great interviews. If you want to talk about your PAX Unplugged experience, feel free to tweet at me on Twitter at DJ_Stormageddon. I would love to talk about your experiences there as well. I got to see a ton of really cool board games. I got to play a bunch of really cool board games every night after the convention. I bought a bunch of board games as well, some of which were featured in this series of interviews. And yeah, so without further ado, here's the very first interview I did, and many other interviews to follow after that. So buckle in and enjoy my coverage and my interviews from PAX Unplugged 2021. So I am here talking to Austin Smokowitz about Robotech Reconstruction. Austin, thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Oh, great to be here. Great to be here at PAX.
So my first question is, can you just give like a few-minute overview of what Robotech Reconstruction is?
So trying to be as concise as possible, but Robotech Reconstruction, it is the 9 episodes at the end of the first season of Robotech condensed into a board game that you can play in 2 hours.
That's amazing. And so would you call this like resource management or control?
Right, so what the game itself is, at a very high level, the game is it's an area control game, because in order to do anything that drives you towards victory, you need to have control of certain territories on the board in order to either do what you need to do, or just locking down those territories will get you closer to a win. You are playing as one of 4 different factions, each with their own asymmetric victory condition. So everybody's looking at the same board, but they're all looking at it very differently as to what is important for them, what their opponents can get away with, and what they themselves need to do in order to get themselves the victory.
So my next question is, Was this always a Robotech game? Like, was that from the get during design, or did this have bones before it became Robotech?
So I did not watch the show until only 2018.
Oh,
so
wow.
I only really watched the show after meeting the owners of Strange Machine Games, who are the publisher who's publishing this game. And they're like, oh, we have the Robotech IP. Have you ever watched Robotech before? And I'm like, no, I haven't watched Robotech before, but I like anime. Sure. So I'm like, okay, well, let me just see what this is all about. At the time, it was on Netflix. Today, it's somewhere else. I'm not sure where you can get it. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But at the time, it was on Netflix, so I just watched it, and I was like, this holds up. This is still really good. This holds up. And of course, because I'm watching it with my gamer brain on, I finish watching the first season, and I come back to these guys, and I'm like, okay, I got 2 games out of this. And I'm like, I explained the first game, and they're like, no, we already have that. That's called Robotech Attack on the SDF-1. You can get that there. It runs through episode by episode, very kind of like Battlestar Galactica, except everybody's actually on the same side, and you're going through the series of the show, right? Very cool.
Right.
And then I started to explain the second game, which is like, okay, well, during this Reconstruction era, there's a lot of really interesting economic and political and military stuff going on here. There's absolutely a game here. And they're like, well, we don't have anything in the Reconstruction era, so why don't you put something together? So the bones of this game was always show first. Yeah. It was always like, this happened in the show. We're going to treat this like it's real. Even though the show takes place in the far future of 2013, but we're going to treat this like historical fiction, and we're going to treat it seriously and build the game off of that. I do have to mention, of course, that this game comes from a series. This game is like this is like a coin light game. So There's a series of games from GMT called the Counterinsurgency series, created by Vocal Rundi back in 2010, 2011, and that's a way to simulate these counterinsurgency guerrilla warfare type scenarios. As I'm watching Robotech, I go, oh, the RDF has to fight a counterinsurgency against the Zentradi rebellion, and they're failing miserably at it. This is a great game. There's a game here, absolutely. And then there's this whole independence movement going on in the cities. Now, I know that this stuff is kind of in the background of the show, but this game takes all that intrigue, that background intrigue, and really brings it to light and allows you and allows you and your friends at the table to play these conflicts out amongst each other.
I really love that. I think what's fascinating about board games is a good board game, you don't need to know the source material, but will be enhanced by knowing the source material. And I get a sense of that looking at, and the demo you gave me, which I'm very grateful for. I'm curious what your board game background is. Have you been playing board games all your life since you were a kid, or is it something you got into more recently?
Sure. So I've been playing board games since I was a kid. Jenga, Kerplunk, Risk. There's this game called Bumper Cars, which I don't think you can really get anymore. I still have my 3rd edition Axis and Allies big coffin box at home. I had a copy of Daytona 500 that my mom was like, I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm like, no, it's still a good game. And they're reprinting it as Downforce. No, I want to keep the original. Even though all the stickers have been completely peeled off the cars and they're gone. But yeah, I've been doing that I've been playing games for a long time, and my co-designer and I, so I'm part of the design duo of Dr. Wictz. Right. I'm Austin Smokowitz, he's Aaron Hanzowitz. Together we are Dr. Wictz. We started co-designing board games back in 2011.
Oh wow.
So we've been doing that for a while. We have a number of unpublished games. We have another game. We have a small wallet-sized game published by Button Shy Games. They're at this convention way down there, but that's out. And so been designing games for about a decade now as a hobbyist profession. And what you see before you is as a realization of that as we continue to move forward in design games.
So I guess my question is, since you've been designing games for a while, next is, how do you get into game design like this? Was there like, how do you discover and find out that this is something you want to do? You want to create these things?
So, if you asked my parents that, they would tell you. They still make fun of me. They're like, well, when I said, okay, I got this thing coming out, you could pre-order it. They're like, okay, but how small are the pieces? Because when I was a kid, I would be cutting out tiny boxes in order to move around. Like, one of my first prototypes was actually trying to recreate Wolfenstein 3D as a board game.
I love that.
But of course, that means you're on a grid paper and everything is tiny and like. So
that's really cool, though. It obviously you're working with a known quantity. Robotech is something that's been around for a while. Are there any other like properties that you would love to design a game for, or ideas that you've had that you've wanted to do?
Well, after this, Aaron's like, okay, next step, Deep Space Nine. Let's do Deep Space Nine, and I'm like, oh my god, the IP headache here. And then I'm thinking like, okay, well, what would that look like? Okay, that's another headache. Okay, wait a minute. One step at a time.
Let's talk a little bit about IPs, right? Because, making this, you could have made this just a mech battle simulator. Like, you could have not taken the IP. Taking the IP gives brand recognition, but I'm sure there's cost to it. How do you evaluate that balance when trying to decide to use an IP versus doing an original idea that's not based on an IP?
Well, I'll say from this gets into this advice for other game designers.
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
If you have an idea for an IP and you want to play it with your friends, just do it. Just do it. But if you're going to try to sell it, realize that there's a lot of extra hurdles along the way in order to get it done. You got to find the right people in order to get it in front of them before they will act. You got to get the right people to say yes for your IP game in order to get it published. Now, in this case, I got super lucky. I got super lucky that I knew the people who had the IP and was able to then, again, show first, design a game around it. So that actually made the design process a lot easier to say, this is what's happening in the show. We are recreating that in a board game.
Right.
Crazy, I know, but we're doing it. But but other than that, like, I myself I personally tend to stay away from designing IP games because it's like, well, if you're trying to get it published, that's one thing. But if you're like, well, how do I do my remaster of the Pokemon Battlemaster board games? Like, that's, that would be more of a personal project, than something to be published out in a setting like this.
The last question I want to ask before I give you a chance to plug the game is, ups and downs during the pandemic. It's been hard. It's still ongoing. Board gaming was tough in the pandemic. Did you learn anything during the pandemic that changed your perspective on board gaming or how to make board games? And if not, what good board game related thing maybe came out of the pandemic, whether it's playing on Zoom or finding new groups to play with? Like, how did the pandemic affect you in relation to board gaming?
So what's interesting is that I have a prototype with me of a game that was created during the pandemic, and it's only been played physically once or twice because everything else has been made digitally. So I would say that to try to answer your question, on the one hand, I've been using a lot of digital tools a lot more, like finally figured out what Discord is and how that works. Became a lot more proficient in figuring out Tabletop Simulator online, and also figuring out that I did not have enough programming language to actually really do anything really cool with Tabletop Simulator. But I think that coming out of the pandemic, one of the things that's really cool is that for at least this period of time, we have a big explosion of single-player and two-player games that have come out of it. That it's a unique period of time. There's a lot of good stuff that came out of it. And then that as we hopefully get back to a point of normalcy, that will recede a little bit. which is also, talking about this game, this is a 3 to 4 player game.
Right.
We on the side, we have been working on a solo mode, but that wouldn't be until way after this game is published. And you go into a pandemic where everyone's locked down, and you're like, well, 3 to 4 players. Okay, good luck, right?
Right, sure.
But as we go forward, we're hoping that will open up, that we'll be able to do big group gamings again, and just being here at PAX, just seeing everybody out here. Yes, everybody's still masked, and yes, everybody had to be vaxxed to be here, but that just makes sure that we keep a nice, safe space and a good, safe community. But it's just such a joy to see everybody out here.
I agree. I think it's just it's not normal yet, but we're returning to normalcy, and we'll hopefully get there within the next year or so. The last thing I would love for you to do is tell folks where they can find you online, find the game online, pre-order it, all that good stuff. Pitch the hell out of this game.
What's nice about having a pseudonym called Dr. Wictz is that if you Google Dr. Wictz, that's Wictz, you will find us.
Yeah.
We are on Twitter and Instagram at DRWICTZ. We are on Facebook at Dr. Wictz Board Games. And of course, you can go to our website at dr.wictz.com. And this game, which is Robotech Reconstruction, you can pre-order it from the Strange Machine Games website. And we're looking at Q2 2022, because everything depends on just how fast the printer can get it printed and where we're going to end up in the shipping lanes,
The last thing I'll ask you to do is we have a saying on certain POV autographs. It's music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're creating, whether music or otherwise, even in the toughest of times, life isn't that bad when you're making something you're passionate about. So if you could say music is life and life is good, we'll wrap up this interview.
Music is life, life is good.
Hey, so I am here with Risa Pearl of Cortex Games. They make tabletop bones to skin your campaigns. It'll make more sense when we get into it. But Risa, thank you for being with me.
I am so excited to be here.
So tell folks a little bit about what Cortex is and why it's different from other tabletop companies.
Yeah, so Cortex is part of a larger tabletop company called Fandom Tabletop. And what's interesting about Fandom Tabletop is we believe in something that we call digital at launch. So digital at launch means that when we have books come out, not only can you buy the physical book, but when you buy the physical book, you always get what we call a digital compendium, which is a fully indexed and searchable digital version of the book. I'm sure many of you have had to download the PDFs of your books before and scroll through them until your finger broke off, but we can, with our books, you don't have to do that. You can search, you can highlight, you can save things, and that's really important to us. Not just the digital book, however, when we come out with games, we believe that you should also have a digital tool set. The TTRPG industry is a very old one, and it's one that hasn't really evolved with technology. And as wonderful as it feels to have those dice in your hands, sometimes you're on the run. Sometimes you're playing with people that are in another country or in another home. And we want to make it easy for you to keep track of your character sheet and to roll for your characters and to play the game in a fully digital space.
And what I really love about what you told me earlier about Fandom and Cortex is that you design a system that's actually agnostic from the source material.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit. That's Cortex in specific. So what I told you about was Fandom Tabletop in general, but Cortex in specific is very near and dear to my heart. It is a rule set that we call it is world agnostic. So like D&D is a rule set, but also a world. And so Cortex is a rule set without a world. So, I was joking that you can put any kind of world onto the Cortex rule set. Right now I am playing a game based on the Fallout series that is using Cortex as a rule set. I'm also playing a game based on ancient Rome using Cortex as a rule set. And I joke with my art director that we want to make a great British bake-off game with Cortex as a rule set, and you can do that. And that's really what's special. So Cortex has a base rule set, but also a number of modifications. So if you want to make your game, if you want to modify it to the world, you can. The way I explain it is a skeleton that you can dress up in different skins. And so we do actually have that book available. It's on cortexrpg.com. Making sure I put that in correctly. It is cortexrpg.com. And you can buy the Prime book that will allow you, that is fully digital compendium and physical, that will allow you to use the Cortex rule set in your own worlds.
And now I'm here because y'all reached out because you are actually partnered with Netflix and the Dragon Prince to put out Tales of Xadia, which is a canon world using this set, right?
How cool is that? So we're actually big fans of the Dragon Prince at Cortex, and we reached out to Wonderstorm, which are the creators of the Dragon Prince, and we said, hey, we have this rule set and we want to partner with you. And they took a look and they said, absolutely. And so canon is the correct word. That's something that we're really, really proud of here. Everything that is in the book is fully canon now. There are characters now that are canon. There are going to be new dragons that are canon. And there is a tale that we have that is going to bridge the gap between season 3 and season 4. All canon. And so what we did is we partnered very closely with Wonderstorm to use, just like you might, to use the Cortex rule set to create a special experience for the Dragon Prince called Tales of Xadia. And that is a book that is coming out at the end of the first quarter of 2022. We're aiming for end of March. And we'll allow you to completely immerse yourself in the world of the Dragon Prince. What's cool about that, though, is if you buy that book and you learn how to play the Dragon Prince, you will be able to learn any other game primed by Cortex very, very easily.
That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit about you. Have you been playing tabletop and board games since you were younger? Is it a recent passion? Because you're the head of product, and so I'm curious how you got connected to this world.
That's a really good question. So I have been a gamer, like a video gamer, since I can literally remember. One of my earliest memories is that there was a arcade in my hometown and that I used to love to go to, and they had a stool with my name on it because I was too short to see over the consoles. And they, I was like their little mascot. I was like 5 years old. Gaming has been a really important part of my life since I was very, very young. And actually my background is all digital. It started out in apps and gaming apps. And it's funny, I went to school, like many people, in their mid-30s. I did not go to school for anything like this because there was no school for anything like this. My degree's in creative writing. And I remember telling my father at one point, I said, I think gaming's going to be my career. And he laughed and laughed, and he's not laughing anymore. Are you, Dad? So my background's in video gaming, but I've been a TTRPG player for many years. And actually what got me this gig is most TTRPG players are super D&D fans. Right. And what they were looking for was someone that wasn't only a D&D fan. So like every interview I had for this role was like, what tabletop games do you play that aren't D&D? Can you tell me about them? And the thing is, all the tabletop games I play are not D&D. And so, so they knew that they found someone that actually wasn't just in it for D&D. And what's interesting about the Cortex rule system, D&D is very tactical, which is super fun. And can be really gritty and you can really sink your teeth into it. But what I love about Cortex and what I'm more drawn to in TTRPGs is something that is more story-based and something that is more character progression-based. And so when I read the Cortex rulebook, I was like, if you don't give me this job, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And I think I scared them, so now I have the job.
I love that, though. I think what's really, it's funny you mentioned going to school for something. I have a business communications degree, right. And now I'm a podcaster, so it's close. It's like in the ballpark. Right.
Creative writing, game design, maybe. We figured it out, didn't we?
I'm curious a little bit about what you look for in a campaign you're going to play in. So, like, for me, I like story. I'm currently playing in a Curse of Strahd game where I'm playing a pansexual Trevor Belmont type who's looking for his husband and flirts with everybody. Yeah, I know, right? Totally outside my comfort zone. I am boisterous, but, like, this is, like, me leaning into charisma in a way that I've never done in a campaign. So I'm curious, like, when you're building characters, do you look to build someone closer to yourself, play outside yourself? Does it depend on the game?
That is a really great question. If it is a video game, it will always be me. I will name it Risa. I am that person. But when it's a TTRPG, I will actually do everything I can to make it as different as possible, because I feel that TTRPGs, my other hobby is actually something called immersive theater.
Oh, I don't know I'm very familiar.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of immersive theater. And I think that TTRPGs, LARPs, and immersive theater have a similarity in the sense that it is you learning about yourself through other characters.
Yeah.
And so, as a video game, I'm Risa. As a TTRPG character, I am anything but Risa because I get to be that person. Right now, I'm playing a Star Wars, I believe it's the Outer Realms. I've been playing it for years. And I am a Drawl, which is a gigantic hamster, named Duchess Dr. Princess Wheeler. Obviously. And, she's a doctor and she's very buttoned up. And as you can tell, I'm also terribly buttoned up. And she's like, royalty. And I just liked having that, exploring that. And that really, when we were playing games, especially role-playing games, we were literally exploring assets of ourselves or aspects of ourselves. And so yeah, in TTRPGs, like, I like to be evil. Because in video games, if given the choice, I will always do the good thing. Because I don't want to get the bad ending, guys. And I'm so stressed out about that. I will play 5 different games with 5 different saves, so I make sure I don't get the bad ending. So that's kind of what and what's cool about the Dragon Prince is we have a full character creation system that will be in the book and will also be available digitally, that will walk you through being able to figure out, do I want to be evil? Do I want to be someone who cares more about their friends than anybody else? Do I want to be they, them? Non-binary is actually something that is in both the world of the Dragon Prince.
Amazing.
And something that we here at Fandom Tabletop really strongly believe in. Everyone should be able to choose their own pronouns. And in the Dragon Prince, in the show, there are people who, they're elves. Not all elves have a gender assignment, and they don't need one. So yeah.
I love that. I'm always fascinated how these games build worlds that are more inclusive, because D&D, its roots are not super great or inclusive. Just look up like stuff around orcs and go from there. But like, I love that for Tales of Xadia specifically, you're looking to do something that the show is doing, but also make it super important for the players.
And you'll see that in the people even here at this booth.
Yeah.
TTRPGs have mostly been, and there's nothing wrong with it, but have historically been run by white men. And as a gamer and as someone who is a female, queer gamer, it was always hard for me growing up. I really didn't have a home. And these people, my team, are my home. And we have people who are of different races, of different genders, of non-binary, completely of the rainbow of queer. It is important to us to feel seen, and we want you to feel seen. And that's so partially, Fandom Tabletop is digital first, but we also feel that there needs to be a progression. And D&D is great. Obviously, we have D&D Beyond. D&D is wonderful, and there are ways to make it queerer, and there are ways to find your way through it. But we don't want you to have to hack the system.
Right.
We want you to be in the system.
I think that's really brilliant. Knowing that you're a big video gamer, and I am as well, I'm curious. 2021. I don't know what year it is anymore. The pandemic just.
Who are you? Who am I?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite game that you played this year? A favorite game that came out?
I don't know if it came. Probably this year was rough. I really liked the new Resident Evil. I was fully impressed with it. I'm playing Deathloop right now, and it's great. As far as like last year, like I don't know if you guys have played Control. Everyone should play Control. You know, it's just I like something that has a really good story. And actually, I was impressed by Deathloop because I played Prey and I loved Prey. Right?
Oh my God, Prey is one of the best games I've ever played.
You guys, Prey. And if you like Prey, you'll like Deathloop. It's the same company that did it. And they're first-person shooters. And like, I do not play online FPSs. I play for the story, but I like a shooter, but I want a story, and Deathloop is doing that for me. You know, and Prey did that for me too. It's a little open world for someone with the amount of ADHD I have. I'm always one of those people that's like, the side quest people are like, please help me. And I understand that they are pixels, and I understand that they've been programmed to ask me to help them, but I am still going to help them, and that's why I play 105 hours of a video game. But there's a lot of good stuff out there. It's just been a really slow year. The new No More Heroes came out, and I'm such a No More Heroes fan.
I love it too.
That like I was just so excited to see Travis sit on the toilet again. But
Yeah, Control is a game I love so much that I launched a side series for my gaming podcast where different hosts talk about a game they love and why they love it. And the premiere episode is me talking about Control and saying nothing about the plot. It's the most incoherent thing if you don't know what Control is, because I don't want to spoil anything.
Shouldn't spoil anything.
I say ashtray maze at least twice.
Ashtray maze!
Because it's one of the best moments in gaming history.
And the janitor who is very special.
Love him.
Ati. Ati is my favorite.
So are you an Alan Wake fan also?
Hey, I was just about to talk about Alan Wake. Did you know that they just announced an Alan Wake 2 in 2023? May have shat myself. It's okay. But if you guys haven't played the remake, it was very, very good.
Yeah.
It was really just a pound for pound remake, but like, if you've forgotten what Alan Wake is, it comes with the DLCs too, which are really, really interesting. Dude, and if you liked Alan Wake and you haven't played Control, I'm not sure what you're doing right now, but you should probably put down this podcast and go buy it. It's on Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass and you aren't sure, just download it, and you can thank both of us later, because you will.
Yeah, it's funny. I played Control first because a friend recommended it, and then I found out Alan Wake was the same world, so I went and played Alan Wake, the original, and loved it. And then I went back and played the Alan Wake DLC, which came out shortly after that, and like, I love that world. I'm so excited for Alan Wake 2.
Dude.
Before we get on an incredibly long tangent about all the games we're playing, which we can, I would love for you to now tell folks where they can find you online, where they can find all of the stuff that you're releasing, and Cortex. Like, give them the pitch.
Oh, yay! Thank you for giving me time to give the pitch. So, if you are interested in making your own world with the Cortex rule set, go to cortexrpg.com and check us out. If you are interested in specifically Tales of Zadia and the Dragon Prince, please go to talesofzadia.com. That's TALESOFXADIA.com. And take a look. We are coming out with the book, like I said, end of Q1 2022. We have already won an ENnie, even though the book's not out, and we've definitely won an ENnie for Best Rule Set for Cortex this year. So we are really proud and really happy to share it with you. Pre-orders are now, but everything will be coming out within a few months, so it's soon. As far as finding me, I actually don't have social media.
Bless you. You're living a better life.
But I would love, if you guys want to email me, you can email me at rpearl@fandom.com. Just send me, send me a note. I'm happy to talk to you. I'm one of those people that really does, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really passionate about what we do. And I want to talk to you. But either of those places will also have links to our social. We are very active socially. And if you have any questions, if you started playing one of our Tales of Zadia tales and you're like, I don't know how this works, you know what? I'm there for you too. So thank you for letting me plug.
Amazing. And then the last thing I'll ask you to do is we have a saying on the podcast, which is music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're creating, even in the worst of times, you can pour your passion, you can feel good in making something. So if you say music is life and life is good, we'll wrap up this interview.
Music is life and life is good, guys. It really is. Don't forget it, even in times like this.
All right, folks, I'm here with Anthony Tessitore, one of the co-creators of Varia, a card game that seems to take some inspiration from Magic, but take this in a whole new direction. So, Anthony, thank you for chatting with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having us on the show.
So, I guess the first question is, how did you come to create a game like Varia? Obviously, there's influence from Magic the Gathering and other card games, but this definitely has its own twist. Did you and your co-designer grow up playing Magic? Is this the kind of thing, like, is this inspired by games you've played before?
It is. It's also, so the original story, right, is that my wife and I, we used to play War all the time.
Amazing.
And so we started getting bored. And so we would change it up by saying, okay, instead of just flipping the top card every time, what if we drew 3 cards and then we played War? Like, oh, when do I put my ace down? When do I do my king, right? So that was the idea that kind of kicked this off, this idea of planning different cards out and then planning a response to them. Also, when I was a kid, I used to play D&D a lot.
Hell yeah.
In between sessions, we would get bored. I would hold a fight club where we would have like the rogue and the wizard like battle each other at the campfire. The problem with that is that it's D&D. So you start wanting to do things like, I'm going to run up a building and jump and stab the wizard in the head. So you need the DM for that.
Yeah.
And the DM is like, I don't know, roll 3d6. But then next week when you're fighting, he says, I don't know, roll 2d6. And you're like, whoa. Last week it was 3d6, right? So the cards allow you to have a similar feel of, you're a warrior, I'm an assassin, we got in a fight, we're rolling dice. But the engine is driven by the card mechanics themselves, so we don't have to consult that DM, right? So those kind of 2 early gaming experiences kind of informed the origins of Varia. I pitched it to my friend Sean, who's a friend of mine we met in college. He's an avid game designer. Him and I then just like went back and forth over and over. And what we like to say is that we played hours of really terrible Varia so that everyone else could play the fun version. So ultimately, that's how we kind of like arrived at the game. It was this early nebulous idea that we slowly kind of just like forced into being the game it is today.
Can you tell the listener a little bit about what Varia is? Give like the 3-minute pitch on what this card game is.
Sure. So earlier you mentioned Magic. When you play Magic, you summon creatures, they fight for you. It's like an RTS or like a StarCraft in that sense. You're the general, right? In Varia, it's more like Mortal Kombat. You pick a character, I pick a character, and then we just beat the crap out of each other, right? So all the cards represent punches, kicks, blocks, windmill slam, I don't know. What do they do in Mortal Kombat? Bicycle kick.
There you go.
Right? That's what the Varia cards represent. Then we have a little bit of variance thrown in with dice, where not every attack is going to land, not every lightning bolt is going to hit for the same amount of damage. So there's a little bit of inspiration from D&D in that respect.
Right.
Keeps things fresh. We actually introduced dice because our resource system, the way we do our resource system, we always have the same amount of action points every turn. There's no potential to ever be mana screwed, mana flooded. That never happens. There's no mana or resource in your deck. So your deck is smaller. You end up seeing the cards over and over again, game after game after game, right? So the variance of your deck is actually super low, to the point where it got boring. So we added a little bit of variance using dice, so that now those attacks that you play again and again and again, they're different every game. One game it's a 4-4, the next game it's a 5-4. The next game, oh my gosh, it was a 9-7. The next game you roll snake eyes and you're like, oh my god, that attack is terrible. You know, but it helps kind of keep things fresh. Because one of the other main design principles that we kind of follow is that there are way too many card games out there that are the barrier to entry is like way too high.
Right.
Either it's too heady, it's too difficult to learn, or you got to drop $700 to be competitive.
Right.
So our game is an expandable card game. Nothing is randomized. There's no booster packs. We sell it in classes. You buy a class. Our first and most preferred format by our players is called Out of the Box. So what that means is you literally play the class as it is in the box, right? All of our classes are balanced against each other, just like in Mortal Kombat. Sub-Zero is balanced against Scorpion, right? How do you win? You get better at the game, right? So if you want to be competitive in Varia or Out of the Box format, all you need is $20. That's it. You're in. Like, you have all the tools that everybody else has.
Amazing.
And that was like one of our main goals. We do let you deconstruct the classes and build your own class if you want to. That is possible. Like, there are deck building rules. But if you wanted all of every card, it would still cost you less than one competitive deck in a trading card game. So
That's really smart. What I love about it is that it's out of the box you can play. Right. You know, I've been a Magic the Gathering player a long time, and I love playing it, but I have old decks. I don't really do drafts that often. And so often if I play against competitive players, they're going to wipe the floor with me because I'm using outdated stuff. What I love about this is it just kind of is the way it is. So you sell the decks individually. You could just buy 2 decks, 2 classes, and start playing.
Yeah, so we have a couple different products. We have a starter set. The starter set has 2 classes in it. It has dice in it. It has the rule book in it. So it's everything that you need in order to just play the game against one other person.
Okay.
We also just sell the classes individually. So if you want to expand the amount of classes you have available, you just pick one more up. If you don't really like the classes that are in the starter set and you want to get 2 different ones, you can do that. Because our rules are also online. We have a Discord. You can come on our Discord and ask, how the hell do I play this game, right? Like, we have people do that all the time. And we're super friendly. We got tons of people who are able to teach and things like that. So
Cool.
But yeah, those are our 2 products.
And how long has Varia been around?
So actually, we launched in March of 2020, which is the same month that COVID launched.
Yeah.
We share a launch month, which is horrifying.
Yeah.
So that's when we launched, but we kind of pulled back and didn't do much purposefully because what's the point? It's like an in-person game, right? We pivoted, we put it on Tabletopia, we have it on Tabletop Simulator, right? But really, now that things have kind of started to get back to normal a little bit, conventions have started opening up, we have relaunched, and we've really kind of started to hit our stride this year. We had a Kickstarter that was successful that added an additional 7 classes to the game. So we now have 15 different class options.
Wow, that's awesome.
That you can have. So it's been great. We've been getting a lot of really great response at these like bigger events, like conventions and things. So it's been really nice.
My next question is more like, where are your nerdy origins? You mentioned D&D earlier, and you mentioned playing War. Have you been playing board games and card games your whole life?
Yes. Yeah, I grew up on games. My family is a family of gamers. My mom's family are poker players, Ohel, Rummy, traditional card games. On my dad's side of the family, we're big board game players, so we would play Rummy Cube, Scrabble, Boggle, Scattergories, like you name it. Like I had an aunt, Rosie was my dad's aunt. She's my great aunt. I loved her to death. She would come visit us twice a month, every month, and she would bring a new board game every month.
All right.
Sorry, 13 Dead End Drive, like amazing stuff. So I've been playing games my entire life. It's something that I'm super passionate about. I got started in this industry I was a names and flavor text writer for Magic, actually, for Wizards.
I just have to personally thank you for all your work. I love flavor text. It's some of my favorite things on the cards. There are so many of them are so funny and clever and interesting, so that's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, I could talk about specifically flavor text and what makes a good card name for hours, and what makes, more importantly, a bad name or flavor text. But yeah, I appreciate it, man. Some people, they blow right over that stuff. I wrote a ton of the flavor text in Varia, just because I could.
Yeah, sure.
Snuck some stuff in there that's kind of funny.
One of the other things I actually want to talk about is the artwork is gorgeous in Varia. So talk a little bit about the artist and like how you created all of the artwork for these cards.
So we are super fortunate to be able to be in a time where you can connect with people across the globe. And really, it was a lot of just hard work in terms of finding artists who were both talented enough that like we could make the game that we wanted to, but also generous enough to want to work with an indie company who had a small budget.
Right.
So ArtStation was our best friend. Like, I cannot tell you the amount of hours that I spent just like looking for artists. I would reach out to them. I'd say, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is my budget. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I know that it's not a lot because I worked on Magic and I know what games like that pay. This is what we can afford. Let me know what corners you would have to cut to kind of hit that. Let me know if this is totally not something you want to do. That's fine, you know, and we can just move on. So we were fortunate in that we found some people who were really interested in just kind of like getting in on like the ground level for that kind of thing. I also I was the art director, right? I am. Right?
I mean, yeah.
I still am. But what I try to do is I recognize the fact that like we're not paying the same rate that like a Magic can pay.
Sure.
So I also don't impart the same restrictions on the artists that you would get if you were working on Magic. So instead of saying, paint this exact character, doing this thing, no ifs, ands, or buts, right? I just say like, paint me a paladin, punching a guy in the face. That's it. You do what you want. You make them look however you want, do whatever you want, like have creative license. And so a lot of artists really like that, and they like being able to kind of work in their own space and not have to worry so much about this like hyper strict brief. Then at the same time, it kind of helps us because, again, you know, I don't make wizard money. Like, they're printing money over there. It's crazy.
Well, the artwork is absolutely gorgeous. Obviously, the Magic influence is here, but I love that it gives you this sense of control. And also out of the box, I think, is really smart. I'm curious, you said 15 classes?
Yes.
Are there classes you haven't made yet that you want to?
Oh my God, yeah.
Is there like, what's the dream class that you want to make? You don't even have a plan for it yet, but is there like one class that you really wanted to make that just kind of exists until you can make it happen?
So for me, I would say an artificer, but I'll caveat, right? When I play D&D, I always play a rogue. Every single time, right? I've played every version of rogue possible. The assassin rogue, the thief rogue, the whatever, lockpicker rogue, right? I have a version of a rogue that I played that I loved in D&D where I was a rogue that was an artificer and I specialized in traps. So I would disassemble traps, I would craft traps, and while I was fighting, I would deploy traps.
Oh, amazing.
In the middle of the battle, right? As I leveled up, I started to trap myself. So my gauntlets were trapped. When I would block, the trap would go off, right?
That's amazing.
Like I became a walking trap. And so I would absolutely love to figure out a way to do that.
Like make a trap master.
Like a trap master rogue who's like skulking around and you're not really sure, like, should I even punch this person? Like, what's going to happen? Are they just going to explode? Like,
amazing.
So I think that would be really cool. The other class that I really, really wanted to get in the game, and I'm super excited about because we did get it in, is the Bard. We did a Bard. I'm a huge music nerd.
Same.
I got to design, he gave me carte blanche, Sean, my co-designer and partner in this, gave me carte blanche on, you do whatever you want with the rogue, you're the music guy. So our rogue is a robotic chicken mechazoid with an electronic bass guitar that generates lightning magic and powers its bass. It's insane.
Amazing. I have to ask, how many Rick Astley quotes did you fit into the flavor text? Oh my God, there's actually an answer to this?
2.
We're destined to become best friends. I can see it. I'm a big music nerd. My first podcast I ever had that's now on hiatus is a music review show.
Okay.
And so like, you just, and this deck already exists. It's out or it's being made?
Which one?
The one you just talked about, the Bard.
Okay, so the Bard is it's finished. It was the Kickstarter. It's going to be getting fulfilled next month in February. So that one takes a lot of influences from punk and metal because I'm like a huge punk metal. I play drums. Like I break stuff when that's my therapy is like break stuff and scream. So that one has a ton of references to like Mastodon, Mars Volta. We have a card called Ariatarka. Or Arias Tarka, it's called.
Right.
But it's Ariatarka, with Mars Volta song. Yort Spaceline, which is a reference to a documentary that Mastodon made on themselves when they were working on Crack the Sky. They had this like weird ceramic head that was sitting amongst all their bass guitars. And Troy was like, yeah, that's Yort, the god of bass. He watches over my guitar. So
wait, are you saying that the Rick Astley quotes are in other decks, the non-Bard decks?
They are in, one of them is in a deck that isn't out yet, and one of them is in a deck that is not the Bard. Yeah, it's just like thrown in secret.
I love that. That's my favorite kind of nerdy stuff.
Oh my gosh.
This has been amazing. The game is so much fun to play. I'm so excited to actually dump so much money into this at some point. I guess before we wrap up, I would love for you to tell folks where they can find you online and where they can find Varia online, the best way to get the game and to follow everything that you guys are doing.
So playvaria.com is where you can find the game itself. You can subscribe to our newsletter. You can buy the game directly from us, right? We're also on Twitter at PlayVaria. We're on Instagram at Play_Varia because a girl in Russia already has PlayVaria. I don't know how that's possible. Myself, I'm on Twitter at Tessitore. And those are probably the best ways to reach us right now. Oh, and then our Discord.
Okay.
But you can, if you go to playvaria.com, we have a link to our Discord on there. That's the best way to interact with us directly. Our Discord is super friendly. Like, we're constantly on there. I'm constantly on there. So that's probably the best way if you wanted to like actually interact with us to do that.
That's amazing, Anthony. The last thing I'll ask you to do is you have a saying on the podcast. It's music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're making stuff, even in the hardest of times, that creative fulfillment will get you through. Life won't be that bad. So if you could say music is life and life is good, we'll end the interview.
Love it. Music is life and life is good.
All right, folks, I'm here with Dani Effertz of Sovranti, doing something a little different at PAX Unplugged. They have an app that is for board games. And you've heard of this before, but Sovranti is a little different. Dani, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what your app actually is?
Yeah, so we are a board game library in one app. So our app is called Sovranti. It's available on the App Store, the Google Play Store, and you can download it on our website for Windows. And you can play cross-platform. And the idea is that you have one app for a whole game library. All of the games in the library are fully rules enforced. So if you don't know a game, you can learn it as you play. Everything has highlights so that you know what's an available option to choose, and it has different rules and things that are implemented.
What I think is really interesting about this is you showed me a game earlier. This is a game that is going to come out, is publishing, but you're working directly with these publishers to digitize their physical games.
Exactly, yeah. So we work with all the publishers. We have a handful of publishers that we're working with. And we digitize their games so that their fans and maybe people who don't know them yet can play their games online.
That's really interesting because like I've been a board game player for a long time, and games like Small World and Risk and all those games have their own app at their own price. And like I don't mind having a bunch of apps, but I feel like this is a brilliant way to bridge the gap between especially. So I guess what I'm curious about is this born out of the pandemic? How long have you guys been around? Like because this feels very opportune as we are still within a pandemic, but hopefully coming out the other side and starting to see each other in person. This feels like something born out of isolation and wanting to play games together.
Yeah, so we started actually about 4 or 5 years ago before today. And we had our founders were starting, they did a bunch of research, why we wanted to do it app-based. And then they kind of started it, and then I started right before the pandemic. So we started to kind of go into the community at a time that appeared as though we were just starting, but we had started years before. But it is kind of an idea, like it's working for the pandemic, but it's also for people who maybe don't live right next to friends and family, or like people who have their con families that they only see like at PAX, for example, or whatever conventions they go to. They can now play with each other in our app, and then they can play across the country.
I love that. I think that what's really interesting about board gaming over the last few years is I saw an increase of 2-player games because a lot of folks are stuck at home with their partners or roommates, and then also an increase in app-based games. I'm curious a little bit about your board game background. You are the community manager for Sovranti. Do you love board games? Have you been playing board games your whole life? Like, where do you come in on board gaming?
Yeah, so I grew up playing a lot of card games with my family. We grew up playing cribbage and 31 and rummy with my grandma. We were a very card game-based family. Then I met my now husband, and he loves board games, and his family loves them. So then I naturally fell in love with board games as well. So I am not as old into the board gaming area, but I have now been playing a lot more.
Do you have a favorite board game?
Well, I have to say, Planet Unknown on our app, which hasn't actually released the physical copy yet, they're working on it, and I'm so excited to receive it. I'm really excited for it. It's a polyomino placement game, and I love those games. So
Those are some of my favorites as well. Talk a little bit about your background in community management. Is this something that you've always done? Is this something new for Sovereignty? Like, what was your path to becoming the community manager for Sovereignty?
yeah, so I actually started as a teacher. I taught middle school and high schoolers, and now I teach our community games. So I started off as a teacher, and then I kind of worked into community management, and basically it's just a way to teach people games and hang out and just talk with people, and it's amazing, and I love it.
So let's talk a little bit about how folks get Sovereignty, and then also, so obviously there must be a cost, and I'm curious, like price point and where folks can find Sovereignty. You had mentioned the platforms briefly, and also, is there cross-play with the different platforms?
Yeah, so you can play cross-platform. So someone can be on a phone and someone can be on a computer or tablet, and you can all play together. You can find us at sovereignty.com. So it's spelled SOVRANTI.com, and you can find more information there as well. But we're also on all those app platforms too. So.
And what's the price point for Sovereignty?
Yeah, good question. So we are a subscription service. The app itself is free to download, and then our free version that you get when you sign up for an account is called Silver. Silver has about 3 to 4 games that are available at a time, and they will rotate. So games can just go on and off, just depending on what we're doing for the month and what we're focusing on. Then we have our next level is Gold, and that's $3 a month annually. And that allows you to play all the games on the platform. If you play with other Gold or Platinum members, and I'll get to Platinum in a minute. If you play with Silver, you have to play those Silver games. However, if you have Platinum, which is $9 a month annually, then as long as one person at the table has Platinum, the whole entire table can play and have the free account, and they can play all the games with you. So it's kind of like a family or gaming group kind of.
That's really brilliant because, typically in physical gaming as well, one person will have the board game, but everyone gets to play. So this idea that you're creating that kind of version of a table digitally is actually really smart.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we are focusing on and wanting to just spread the love of gaming around. And
so what's the plan for Sovereignty? Obviously, you guys have a handful of games now. You're more focused on partnering with the publishers, so the library is a little smaller. Let's talk a little bit about that process, actually. How does the partnership with the developers and the game companies work? Do you reach out to them? Do they reach out to you?
Yeah, so it just depends on at the beginning we were more reaching out to publishers that we knew. Now people are starting to come to us too. And it's fully a contracted relationship. We honor all their games, and they partner with us to put them onto the platform.
I love that. And they are involved, they get something monetarily out of this too. It's not just they sell you the game and then you're making the money. It's a partnership with these developers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when we create a game, so we go through the whole publishing process, then we go through it with the actual publishers and just verify that this is how they would like their game displayed. Is it set up the way that they envisioned it? Is it how they want it to be displayed? Is this the right prompt for this action? Things like that to make sure that their game is getting that quality online experience.
I love that. I noticed that it's, of course, all in English. Do you offer other language options for the platform and things like that?
Not yet. Just as we're growing, we'll keep continuing to grow and add new languages. But as of right now, we're just in English. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious about your current gaming and pastime experience. Do you have any other hobbies outside of board games?
Well, I really do enjoy board games. We play a lot of board games in my house, and physical and online, obviously. But I just I'm a really big people person, so I love just spending time with people however I can, whether that's board games or going to the beach or going on walks, biking, anything like that. Just hanging out with people is kind of my pastime.
I'm curious if Sovereignty has any plans to go to other platforms. Obviously, a lot of mobile games have gone to the Switch recently, and Steam is an Epic Store. Do you have plans, even if they're not concrete yet, to try and explore those other platforms?
Yeah, so we're ever growing, ever trying to figure out what is our next plan. As of right now, we're on Apple, Android, and Windows, and Mac. But we'll keep growing and keep readdressing that as we go, but nothing necessarily set in stone right now.
Right. The idea is that you would love to do all those things. It's just a matter of how and when you can.
Exactly, yeah. Just when is the next thing, and yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And where are you guys based?
So we're based out of Minnesota. So we're a Minnesota-based company.
Long schlep to get to Philadelphia, huh?
Yes, but the weather is a little warmer here.
Before we wrap up the interview, I would love for you to tell folks where they can find you online, and then, of course, more importantly, find Sovranti online, social media, all that stuff. Pitch this platform so folks can go find it.
Yeah, so basically, I'm Sovranti everywhere. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now we have recently launched into TikTok. Yeah, super exciting. We also have a Discord if you're looking for a group to get together. We get together every Tuesday, 6 to 8 Central Time. And we play games together. So if you're looking for a group, we're on Discord. You can find all of our links in the footer of our website. Again, that's sovranti.com, so you can check us out there.
Dani, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. The last thing I'll ask you to do is you have a saying on this podcast. The saying is, music is life and life is good. It's born out of my music podcast, and it's this idea that as long as you're creating, as long as you're making something, no matter how hard life gets, putting your passion into those creative pursuits will get you through and will always make life worth living. So if you could say music is life and life is good, we'll end the interview.
Music is life and life is so good.
All right, I am standing with the Commander of Coordination, a very serious title, the incredible Chris Walters. Thank you, Chris, for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
So I am interviewing you, the Commander of Coordination for Inside Up Games, a game publisher here at PAX Unplugged. Let's start by talking, just give the elevator pitch about Inside Up Games. What makes your game company different? Talk a little bit about who you guys are.
Yeah, our slogan's let's do something. So we want to play games, which means that we got to appeal to every gamer. So our thing, we're pretty small. We're fairly new compared to some of these major companies. So our thing is we create games that appeal to everyone. So you can go anything from solo, competitive, cooperative. We have some that are dexterity games. We have some that are trick-taking games. Some that are very take that. Some that are very let's all be friends together. Anything from cartoony art about gladiators or building ancient Rome, climbing a mountain, to very photorealistic. We're talking about environments and plants and trees. So we try to appeal to all ages, to all groups. Since we're so small, we don't really have a big identity of we do war games, we do this. And So for us, it's a lot of what do we want to play? And what do folks say? We're coming out eventually, probably Q2 of 2022 with a draft and write. So it's going to feel very much like a combination of Gone Sean Clever, so that little roll and write mechanic, with drafting cards like you would do in Seven Wonders. So we saw we didn't have that, and we said we should have something like that. And we went, let's find someone. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything with us.
I'm curious about, from the design standpoint, do you guys have in-house designers? Do you partner with independent designers? How does that relationship work?
Right. You say, you guys, was really just two of us. And we have, of course, some very dedicated volunteers, many of who are here. But Connor, the guy who started it all, the decider of all things, that is his title. He is one he started Summit with his business partner. Summit is his first design that he self-designed, self-published. It's something now that has 2 expansions and kind of is a cornerstone of our company. But then we have a lot of other designers and artists that we bring in. So some of them are designs that we co-collaborate with. Some of them are someone like Black and Key, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Someone came to us and said, here's this really great game. And we go, okay. And so we do, where our strengths lie is taking something from that design or that idea, and then how do I put a really great theme on it? How do I give great materials and components to it? How do we take a gem and really polish it up? Because that's what we do well. How do we get a great artist? How do we get all of those things figured out?
I'm curious, for you, where did you come into board games? Have you been playing board games your whole life? Are you really into it? How did you get involved in this world?
Well, I was a chess kid in high school and middle school, so the original board game, I guess. But then in college, I played a lot of the Catan and the Ticket to Ride and some of those base games. And then I had a friend of mine who said, well, let's start a podcast. And I go, okay. I don't know a lot. And so we did a lot of learning. And then how I got started with Connor is we actually covered one of his games, Gorus Maximus, on the podcast. And then a couple years later, he goes, do you want to come hang out at PAX Unplugged with me and sell my games? And I said, sure. And it's through that time I started playing more and more. And I went from someone who was just enjoying the hobby to now I see a lot of our initial pitches. And someone comes to me and says, I have this idea. And I go, well, let's see what it feels like. And how do we make that kind of be this cohesive, great selling game? So I've taken all of that learning process and been able to kind of fuse that into polishing and taking things to that next step.
Well, I love that. And let's talk a little bit about your position. What exactly do you do for Inside Up? Your title is incredible. But what does that boil down to for your partnership with Connor?
Honestly, anything Connor doesn't want to do. Let's be honest. No, Connor's amazing. And again, what he does well is he really takes a game and takes it to that finished product. But with that, and especially now, we're hoping to get, in 2022, 5 games released. It's a big undertaking. There's a lot of the day-to-day that goes into reaching out to content creators and media. Here's a game, but we need a review of it. Here's a game, but we need people to know about it. And so I do a lot of our outreach. I coordinate our volunteers to things like conventions, play tests. I work with media to get these copies into their hands and show it off. And then I also kind of when we're in a Kickstarter and folks are like, what's happened to our game? We all are familiar with the shipping issues. And, Black and Key was supposed to come out in August, but between some production issues and some shipping issues, we're now pushed to March.
Right.
And so it's, how do you tell people who invested in you, we're not ready to do that yet? So a lot of that is that kind of touch base, kind of share because a lot of folks kind of feel uncomfortable when there's just not information out there.
Right.
So my goal is to give you the information so that it's really easy to go, what we're doing. And here's what to expect from us. And so that's my goal, is be that outward face for us.
It sounds like you're more of a jack of all trades, kind of filling in where you need to.
Yes.
Which is a very important role in kind of any business. You mentioned it a few times, Block and Key. I'm looking at the pieces. It feels very Tetris. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about this, of your newest game?
Yeah. So Block and Key is a 3D Tetris. So you're playing from one perspective. So you have one side of the board you're really building off of and focusing on. We have objectives that you're trying to place blocks on the board to really make those objectives happen in the patterns. When you do so, you get a point, you get to claim a new one. So it's a lot of trying to kind of make that happen. But everyone else is on another side of the board, and they're doing the same thing with their cards. So what ends up happening is you get a situation where you're like, hold on, I had this set up. Here it is. So in this position, you've got your setup, but then someone else goes, I actually need this block to go here.
Oh, no.
Now, because they're, from their perspective, they've fulfilled their objective, but they've now blocked yours.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit of that, it's never an intentional take that or
right.
I'm trying to mess up your board. But incidentally, you get that interaction that just kind of happens. So
It gives me a kind of Carcassonne vibe in the fact that Carcassonne, you're building for yourself, but when you put a monastery down, that could screw over everyone else around you.
Yes. Well, and another thing too, what we really love, and this is an older copy, it's not our polished copy, but what is known about it is all the rules are printed on the box.
That's awesome.
So how many completed objectives you need, placement rules, and this is the game board and the box. So this is the base, that's the
Brilliant.
lid, and it fits in a sleeve. So how many times have you played a game and you go, I don't know, I don't need this insert right now. I don't need this box right now. Now, you just
put it to work.
Yeah, and then you just collapse it all afterwards, and it's put everything in it and put the sleeve on. So
I love that. I mean, I love the pieces feel hefty and gotta weight, and I'm a sucker for that. You give me a nice metal token in a game.
Metal coins.
Yeah. So I guess my next question is, what do you see as the future of publishing, especially for Inside Up games? Obviously, you plan to publish 5 games next year. Although depending on when I release this episode, it could be this year.
Right.
But like, what is something that you really want to accomplish, or something that you foresee for this company that you would really love to do?
Well, something I think we have done is start expanding with more people and more games, but doing something a little different and innovative. Like Goris Maximus, one of our games, is a standard trick-taking game like Hearts and Spades, but it's got a twist. Something like Block and Key has a three-dimensional table presence that's different.
Yeah.
When we take something like Earth, we're molding these characteristics and these mechanics together to be something different. So I think for us, it's finding something new in this industry that's very saturated with, train games and all the things. Like, we have a game coming out called Terminus, again, probably later in 2022, that is a rondel, but it's subway building theme. You're a construction company. But how do you take something that is, as an industry, we've made billions of subway and train games, and make it different and unique? And so, that's what it is for us, is how do we take something that is very much like maybe been somewhat done before and make it different. Like, we have a game, Seven Souls. How many Cthulhu-themed games have we seen? Well, the difference is, instead of being someone trying to stop the elder gods from coming to the world and gaining power, you're an elder god trying to corrupt the world and come to power. So it's like the flip, right? And it's something as simple thematically as being a little different. I mean, simultaneous action and deck building are mechanics that have been around forever. But we take a cool theme and we twist it in a way to make something new and different. So that's what it is for us.
I really love that. Have you seen, we're now day 2 of PAX Unplugged, have you gotten to walk the floor at all? Have you seen some games that really interest you?
Yes, I have. Some that are a little older and that I just haven't ever gotten my hands on, and I'm like, oh yeah. Like another Canadian company has a game, Chai, that I know a lot of folks love, and that's one that I've been wanting to get my table forever. Kabuto Sumo was another one that I saw that recently came out, but I saw in its the designer in their early stages. So to see something, when he was first working on it a couple of years ago, to how they are now with their product, it's awesome to see. So yeah, there are definitely titles to check out, and a lot of what I've been focused on is here. But yeah, I did get to walk this morning, and it was fun. So.
I love that. The last thing I'll ask you to do, first, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm very excited to check out all of these games. I would love for you to just pitch away, tell folks where they can find you if you'd like, and of course Inside Up Game on the internet, where they can buy your games, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so we have our website, insideupgames.com. It has all of our current titles, as well as, again, Block and Key on late pledge right now, so you can still get access to it before it hits retail. We're on all the social media under Inside Up Games, so find us there. We also have links to our newsletters and things like that, so if you sign up to those links, which again are on our website, we'll send you updates like, hey, Block and Key's coming to retail, and that is coming to Kickstarter. So yeah, we'll do that. Just come find us. We're small, we're mighty, but we're ready to be seen. So
well, thank you, Chris. The last thing I'll ask you to do is, we have a saying on my podcast, which is music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're creating, as long as you're making something, no matter how hard life gets, you can pour your passion into that, and it can fulfill you if you are a creative type. So if you can say music is life and life is good, we'll wrap up the interview.
Music is life is good.
Alrighty, folks, I'm at Floodgate Games. I'm talking to Ben Harkins, the owner of Floodgate Games. Ben, thank you for taking the chance to talk to me.
Happy to. Thank you.
So, Ben, I guess let's start by, since you are the owner, tell me a little bit about Floodgate Games. What makes you special as a publisher?
Yeah, I've been running Floodgate since about 2012. We're best known for the game Sagrada, which is a dice drafting game of building stained glass windows. And I love creating games that create everlasting experiences for our gamers.
And so you started as a game designer? Is that where all of this birthed from?
Yeah. I've been designing games my whole life. And way back in 2011, I designed a game called Legacy Gears of Time. Shortly after, put it on a little website called Kickstarter, which not many people had heard of.
No.
And just a few hours in, a stranger traded me money for a game that didn't exist. So that's kicked everything off.
Are you someone who grew up with board games? Have you been playing board games your whole life?
Yeah. I played a lot of Risk as a kid and learned to play chess really young. So board games or tabletop games in general have been a big part of my life.
Awesome. And so what kind of games does Floodgate as the whole make? Do you specialize in a certain genre, or is it kind of just a catch-all?
No, we try to focus on basically two big categories. One is the spatial puzzle game. Like Sagrada is really great in that it's puzzly as you're placing the dice. You have restrictions that you're navigating around and trying to fit each one in just so. And then at the end, you have this really colorful window. We have a forthcoming game called Vivid Memories that's all about collecting childhood memories, and you're building networks of these fragments of memories as you go. So another like network building sort of puzzle in where the colors and shapes go sort of game. So that's kind of the one half that we focus on. The other half is really sort of unique experiential games. We recently acquired Fog of Love, which is a romantic comedy as a board game. You play as two characters in a relationship, navigating through scenes where you're deciding how they react and how that influences their balance in the relationship, choosing whether they stay together or not. And then we have a forthcoming game in March called Decorum, which is a passive-aggressive game of cohabitation, where players are roommates decorating a house together. They each have their own secret requirements. You can react, but you have to do it passive-aggressively by only saying, I love it, I hate it, or I'm neutral to the changes that your partner's making to the house. But it is collaborative in that there's always a solution. So we love those spatial puzzle games, and then we love these like sort of higher level experience, kind of think about real things but play as characters games too.
I love that. Since you are a designer yourself, I'm curious as a publisher how you work with designers. Do you have in-house designers? Do you partner with independent designers? Like, how does that process work?
Oh yeah, I try to meet designers everywhere I can. Everybody's got such unique, interesting ideas, and we're now to the point where folks are coming to us. So I'm definitely honored to have people come share their games with us. But mostly it's about building relationships and meeting people and letting them know what we're looking for and finding that right fit. It's not just about the game; it's about the collaboration with the designer as well.
Are you looking for something specific when you collaborate with designers, or are you just like, you like to hear pitches, you like to see what the kinds of things people are thinking of are?
Yeah, I mean, like you're working together and you're talking a lot and you're ideating together, which is a really like sort of intimate experience. So I am looking for unique ideas that hit the brand, but I'm also looking to work with people that are just fun to be with and fun to work with, and work together to like get everything to be the best game that it can be.
Now, we are still within a pandemic. Wear a mask, get vaccinated, all of that shit. Do you find as a publisher you did better in the pandemic, or you struggled during the pandemic? Because I'm curious as a publisher how that really affected your growth and change within your publishing itself.
Oh man, it's so multifaceted, my answer to that. Like obviously people were all stuck at home and playing games, so we sold a lot of games that were already popular. Like that worked out pretty well for us, but also like newer releases were a little tougher. So there's kind of a mixed bag, but mostly what I really missed was the social connection, connecting with friends in the industry and connecting with new people and just the energy of being at a convention and getting face to face. Like, so while things remained okay financially, it was still really tolling on myself and the rest of the team from like a social perspective.
Did you find yourself as someone who plays games playing a lot more two-player games and smaller games during the pandemic?
As a gamer, yeah, we played. It was me and my wife, so we played a lot more two-player and didn't get the really like big experiences to the table like I usually do with my own personal game groups, of course. And we played a lot online. We moved all of our play testing to Tabletopia, and so ended up trying to connect with people that way. It's of course not the same. We love being in person and the tactile experience of playing a game on a table, but it was a nice proxy for the time.
I'm curious about your game playing background. Do you have a favorite kind of game to play? Do you have a favorite game of all time that you love to play?
Oh yeah, I would say my two favorite games are Libertalia by Paulo Mari. It's just such a crazy, unique game where everybody starts on an even playing field, and like how the game diverges as you go. And it's got a pirate theme, which is super cool. And then Acquire, which is an older Sid Saxon game. It's just fascinating how the themes tie into like different companies acquiring each other with just simple tile placement and interesting speculative decisions. So kind of different than the games I publish, for sure.
I'm curious, as a designer and a publisher, are there any ideas that you've had in your craw for a while that you just can't quite figure out how to get out, or like certain themes you really want to approach, but you're not quite sure how to move into that space?
Yeah, definitely. I have a computer science background, so I'm really fascinated with generative content. So leveraging computers and various like programs in order to generate new content for games. So we're going to start exploring that with like a print on demand. So still keeping things in the physical realm, but creating expansive content that is unique, and then also maybe even entering the realm of customization with some of the content as well.
I'm curious. So PAX Unplugged, of course, we didn't get to have it last year. We're so grateful to be back this year. Do you find that this is the best way for you to sell games, promote games? Is these kinds of con experiences versus an in-store or online experience?
I think the thing I love the most about cons is that you actually get to, as a publisher, just directly connect with your audience. Sales notwithstanding, like that opportunity to connect with fans and to create a moment for people, I think that pays off in dividends. Just in like most of the people who help us out at cons, we met at cons, and I think that's just an amazing base for growing our audience, and that all just pays off as it ripples out into retail support and mass market support as well.
Is there any games that you guys have coming out in early 2022 that you really want to push or talk about? Anything that's really interesting or fascinating that you guys are working to publish?
We have a huge list of games coming out next year. The two I'd like to highlight that I mentioned, Vivid Memories, a really great puzzle game. If you like Sagrada, you're going to love this. It's kind of the next level of like one notch more complex, adding a little more of like tension to the decisions as you're going. Again, it's a tile drafting game with a little bit of route building and some really interesting tense decisions. And then also Decorum that I mentioned before. Super interesting experience of a game. You get to play through and really have this like nice tension in how you're actually working together, even though it doesn't feel like it as you play.
That's awesome. I'm curious, do you have any other hobbies outside of board games? Do you play video games? Do you like to play music? Like, is there things that you do that maybe help inspire the games that are outside of board gaming?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they inspire, but I do a lot of video gaming. But also I'm really interested in electronic music and electronic music production. I'm formerly an electronic music DJ, so I try to keep my toes dipped in that water as well.
Any interest in creating a electronic DJ style game?
Oh man, I made a game a long time ago about like being dance teams in nightclubs, and it was like I was really jacked about it, and it was just a total flop. Like the crossover just didn't seem to be there.
I mean, I feel like Harmonix has got that corner kind of under control with both physical stuff and, of course, Fuser, which is their new DJ game. Are there any favorite video games from past year or coming out that you're really excited about?
Favorite video games? I played a lot of Lepia Landlord. That was super cool. It's kind of a deck builder. It's like a slot machine builder, so it really scratched that itch. And the 8-bit aesthetic was super cool. But that's a cool game to check out.
Awesome. The last thing I would love for you to do is tell folks where they can find both Floodgate Games and yourself online, the best way to buy your games, find out more information.
Yeah, we're on all the channels, Floodgate Games, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. We're starting to explore TikTok because that's a thing now. But you can find our website at floodgate.games. Go check that out. It's the best way to support us directly, and we really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you for taking this time. The last thing I'll ask you to do is you have a saying on the podcast. It's music is life and life is good. It's the idea that as long as you're creating, as long as you're engaging in art, no matter how hard things get, it's not that bad because you can express yourself creatively. So if you say that, we'll go ahead and end the interview.
Music is life and life is good.
All right, folks, I'm here with Tom Wetzel, marketing coordinator, games specifically, for Kosmos. Tom, thank you for talking with me.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on your show.
So let's start real simple. We're still at PAX Unplugged. Let's just talk a little bit about what Kosmos is, what Kosmos Games is.
So we are a German-based company, but our focus is on accessible games for both families and friends to play.
Awesome. So mostly focused on like multiplayer games, like 3 to 4 player kind of thing?
Yeah, but actually this year we have our first social deduction game. So that's our highest player count, but most of our games are the 1 to 4 player game.
Awesome. And how long has Kosmos been around?
This is our 200th year. Can you believe it?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what's Kosmos' earliest game?
So the games only go back to, I think, the 60s, and I can't remember the first game, but it was like, I think, a little card game that, disappeared decades ago. Before that, it was all books and science kits, and we still do science kits as well.
That's amazing. Talk a little bit about what you do as the marketing coordinator. How are you integral to the process for board games and for especially Kosmos?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on. I said before that we're based in Germany, but obviously our games are released here in English. And that may seem like a small thing where you just throw it into Google Translate, but there's a lot more that goes on, especially when you talk about our Exit the Game line. Exit the Game is an escape room game in a box, and a lot of the riddles are language-based, and sometimes things don't just translate over so easily. So we sometimes have to actually manipulate and change and play through again, and manipulate and change and play through again. So there's a lot that goes on with creating and localizing these games.
I feel like that's something that we only hear about with video games, right? Localization of Japanese studios and stuff. It's really interesting to hear that about Kosmos and about board games. Are the games initially designed in another language and then translated to English always, or are some of the designers American and making games in English as well?
So we do have some games that are originally developed in English, but we have a big editorial staff in Germany. So what they'll do, and this is kind of funny, but they'll actually translate those games from English into German. They'll edit them and play through them and play test them, and then we translate them back into English. But after that very valuable editorial process, it's definitely worth it.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure it's much easier to edit and adjust and understand in your primary language. I'm curious a little bit about the partnership with the designers. Do you guys have in-house designers that you always work with? Do you work with independent designers who have an idea? What's that partnership like?
Yeah, so all of our board games are designed by independent designers, and we're lucky. Kosmos is a big company, especially in Germany, and well, actually here too. Don't want to toot our own horn here, but we're pretty big, so we're lucky enough to get a lot of the biggest board game designers. We're staring at a game by Martin Wallace, Michael Menzel, Inka and Marcus Brand, and Rainer Knizia. We have the all-star designers. Now, we don't have them exclusive. They have developed games for other companies, but we are lucky to have them develop a lot of great games for us.
I always love how collaborative board gaming feels. Video game design on the less indie side, more AAA side especially, feels more like it's less collaborative depending on the publisher, but it does really feel like board games. It's like anyone with a design and a dream can kind of pitch and partner with some of these bigger publishers. Absolutely.
And we have taken on some very I will say first-time designers and published their games with great success. So that's it is true. It's a real dream that can actually happen.
A question I've been asking a lot of the publishers is the quarantine wasn't easy for a lot of folks. We're still living in a pandemic and trying to make our way through it. What was that like for Kosmos? Did you find that you were selling more games, less games? Obviously, a lot of companies took financial hits, but I'm curious how you saw the board game space through the pandemic.
Boy, it's been a wild ride. And the biggest thing has been board games have actually been in pretty high demand because a lot of people are staying home and a lot of people are looking for things that they can do at home with their family. So having a family line of games, we've had a lot of desire and a lot of requests for our games. And then, of course, the shipping crisis really put a damper on that. We probably could have sold twice as many games this last year if it weren't for the shipping crisis. Luckily, we were able to get most of the games that we wanted. We got all of the releases we wanted this year and most of the quantity we wanted. So we're lucky, but it obviously cost us financially.
Of course, I think it's been a struggle for a lot of different people in different industries just because it's hard to predict something like this, especially considering in the U.S. it was much harder as it wasn't anticipated as well as it could have been. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about your personal game history, Tom. Did you grow up playing board games? Are you a board gamer at heart?
I did. I grew up playing board games, but I didn't play the hobby board games that we have here. I grew up playing a lot of the classic board games with my family. We played Hearts, the card game, all the time. So a lot of card games, and then, of course, the classic ones. I got into the hobby side about 10 years ago when a friend of mine was like, "You want to play this game called Catan?" Classic. And then that spiraled out into Carcassonne, and then, the rest is history.
Carcassonne is still one of my favorite games because there's something about creating the world as you play. I'm curious, does Kosmos have a more general style of game they stick to within the family realm, or is it kind of really any kind of game from card games to strategy to resource management? Do you have a preferred genre, or do you just kind of are a little all over the place?
I mean, a good game is worth publishing regardless of where it fits on that spectrum, but I think for the most part, our comfort level is strategy family games. We do have some younger age games like Andor the Family Fantasy game that came out this year. That's for ages 7 and up, and that's a great game. But I think that more likely you're going to see games that are for like the 10 plus age range, where it's got some strategy and some rules, but we don't want anything to take too long to either learn or play, because the family is a really, it's a big audience, but it's also like the common denominator, because a bunch of friends getting together to play, they'll also play an hour-long game, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what you guys have got coming up. Clearly you have a game, Anno 1800, that's out right now. You referenced it before. Is this a game that is out or is coming out?
That one just came out just a couple of months ago, and it's been super popular. So, yes, that one is available now. Right next to it, we have Robin Hood. That's a game by Michael Menzel. That was released about a month ago, and that was also nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, which is great.
Cool.
So that one is available now. And then next to that, we have The Crew, the Mission Deep Sea follow-up to The Crew, Quest for Planet 9 by Thomas Singh. Boy, we're having a banner year.
Talk a little bit about the process leading up to the release of a game. How do you guys, especially in marketing, the internet marketing scape is changing so much, especially on Twitter and on social media. How do you prepare for the launch of a game? What is the kind of game plan you would go through to market something that's coming?
Well, it takes a lot of consideration what the best plan is for each individual game. Something like Anno 1800 and Robin Hood and The Crew, we actually put advertisements out on, some heavily trafficked hobby board game areas. Mm-hmm. Whereas a game like Ubongo 3D that came out, that's a great game, but we see that doing really well with more of the casual gamer, So we send copies of that out to reviewers that aren't necessarily board game reviewers. We'll send it to like a lot of the mom blogs, things like that. And that usually gets us some really good coverage because they're not used to reviewing games. This is a nice break for them. And then, of course, when they play it and they love it, then we get great reviews that way. So each game gets real, unique consideration.
I love that. I like that you guys seem to know your audience really well. And depending on the area you think it'll fit in, you'll adjust the marketing campaign. Have there ever been games that you guys have published that you really felt strongly about that just didn't find their path because of maybe marketing or audience or timing? Have you found games that maybe you personally love that maybe the audience doesn't always see?
The one board game that comes to mind is one of my favorite games that Kosmos published in the United States was one called Steam Time. And it's unfortunate that one is no longer in our catalog, because it just didn't sell that well, but I love that game, and I will say that game actually came on right before I started working with Kosmos, so I don't know what the marketing strategy was at the time. It was also in the very first year that we took on board game distribution in the United States, so I think there may have been some growing pains there, which is really unfortunate. I still have hopes that game will come back, because it's fantastic.
I want to talk a little bit about licensing games, because obviously you have a Robin Hood game, which is a different kind of license, right? Because that's a public domain property. It's one that you don't have to license, but also there are always movies, there are always TV shows, there are always comic books and cartoons starring this very famous character. Mm-hmm. When creating a game like that, do you know if the designer had any influence from a particular version, or is it just kind of their own imagination of this character and its world?
Oh, that's a great question. So Michael Menzel, the designer of that game, he actually wrote a nice journal entry or like a blog and then published it online. So you can look that up if you want to see how that was influenced. And yeah, there is some influence there, but the cool thing about this is I want to say that the characters and everything are all influenced by the classic narrative, but he has a unique story. It's not any one that you'll find in a specific movie or cartoon. It's unique, but so yeah, more of a broad influence. Whereas games like Anno 1800, I don't know if you know, that's actually a video game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that was a paid for IP. We had to pay to release that. But it's such a good game, and a lot of people. I mean, I can't remember how many. It was like 5 million copies of Anno the video game have been sold, that franchise. So like that's a obvious built-in market. So like yeah, it's worth it in that case.
Well, I'm always fascinated by that too. Some of my favorite games, especially by big publishers like Fantasy Flight, are games based on properties. And even if you don't like the property, the best games like this you can still enjoy. And that's always my favorite thing. Like I've been obsessed with the Gears of War board game, which I don't own. I love the franchise. I played it once, and I've not seen it since it's out of print, unfortunately. It's fascinating to me to take a game that seems like it couldn't fit in a board game and then putting it in one. I think that the translation between those two mediums are extra fascinating to me. Do you play video games at all? Have you played any board games that were video games or vice versa?
I don't play a lot of video games, so I'm not an expert in that. But I will say that I've talked to a lot of people who've played both the video game and the board game of Anno 1800, and they tell me that it is similar in its feel, but the board game is not a cardboard copy of the video game, which makes sense because it would probably be 5 times bigger.
Sure. The last thing I want to ask is, where does Kosmos see the future of board games going? Do you have any grand plans for types of games, markets you want to reach? Like, what does the future for Kosmos look like?
I know that we've had a lot of success with narrative in our games. So games like Robin Hood, which is a strong narrative. Games like our exit games and our adventure games, we call them like our story-based game line. Those have seen the most growth and the most success, so I think you'll see us producing a lot more games like that. Mm-hmm. But we also, again, see a lot of success with the family weight games, and obviously games like Anno 1800, which I'm saying is still in the family weight because even though it's a 2-hour game, there are obviously a lot of families who will play a 2-hour board game. So I think that's what you're going to see us do a lot of.
I love that. Lastly, of course, I would love for you to plug where folks can find Kosmos and things related to Kosmos online, where they can buy your games and check out all the lovely stuff we've talked about today.
I always recommend people support their local game store. That's where I shop, and that's where I want everyone to shop because I love the local game stores. They are the lifeblood of this industry. If you can't find it there, or if you're in a very rural area, like we do have a website, thamesandcosmos.com, where you'll also find some of our science kits, which we also produce. But honestly, yeah, go to your local store. I love those guys.
I think that's a great pitch. I agree. I love my local game store. Most of the games that I'd never played and then discovered I loved is because someone at a game store said, I know what you like. You should buy this game. You're going to dig it. 9 times out of 10, always works. Tom, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. The last thing I'll have you do is you have a saying on the podcast. It's music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're creating and you're making something and you're pouring your passion into that, no matter how hard life gets, you can find satisfaction in creating. So if you could say music is life and life is good, we'll wrap up the interview.
Music is life and life is good.
All right, folks, I am here with Sebastian Yue. I am very excited to be here talking with Sebastian. They are an incredible TTRPG writer, designer, and editor. I was connected via the incredible Bellamy Beastly. So, Sebastian, thank you for taking the time to chat with me.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
So, Sebastian, let's talk a little bit. You're one of the first non-game designer or publishers that are working a booth that I've spoken to. So, what are you doing here at PAX Unplugged?
Well, I am a game designer, but I don't have a booth. I'm a freelance and independent game designer and writer and editor. I am here because this is my first PAX. This is the first opportunity I've had to come to this convention. This is the first time I've known anybody else that was going. I've been doing games and been in this scene for about a year and a half now, so I really wanted to meet some folks in person. I really just wanted to see what this convention was all about. I didn't even know that there was a dedicated tabletop convention, although of course it makes perfect sense that there was. This is also my first time in Philadelphia, so I had many, many reasons to be here.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about the stuff that you work on. So it specifically says TTRPG writers. We've had a few of those on the show. Why don't you talk about a little bit about either your most recent or some of your TTRPG projects?
So I have experience writing for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, as do many people. I have also written an unofficial supplement for Rowan Rook and Descartes' Heart the City Beneath. And I specialize in adventure design and narrative and player options. Those are my favorite things to do. I publish to the DMs Guild, and I also publish on itch.io, if you're familiar with those platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I love itch.io. There was essentially Shira, not Shira TTRPG that was on that. Yep, and I love it. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but I definitely want to, but I got it in one of their collections. I guess where I'll start, and where I like to start with a lot of guests, is, were you always a TTRPG fan? Did you grow up playing D&D and that kind of stuff?
I did not. My first TTRPG was Pathfinder in 2014. I really wasn't very good at it at the time. I didn't understand the premise. I was one of those players who couldn't remember what their options were in combat. It took so long to do, and then so I played that for a bit. I didn't play again until a group of my friends were like, "Hey, would you like to play a game with us?" And then I've been doing that consistently since 2018. I had a really good time doing that, and then I decided that I wanted to write my own adventure, and then it kind of went from there. And I wrote one, I published it, and then I was like, "Oh, I want to keep doing this. This is fun."
I see that you're also a voice actor. You've been in some games and stuff. What led you to want to do voice acting?
Honestly, it was just something that I wanted to try out. I decided just to do a whole bunch of stuff. I wrote down a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to get into and see what it was about. I did the same thing with modeling. There just happened to be a couple of opportunities for me to work on games, and I provided the voice of Whisperer in Don't Wake the Night, which is an indie game that you can find on Steam and on itch. And I'm also in the upcoming visual novel dating sim The Office Type. I'm there actually alongside Gabe James Games, if you've spoken to him as well. Yeah, they are roaming around this convention, actually, so, yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. So I'm curious about what your education background is. You are from across the pond, as they say. Did you go to school for acting or for writing?
I went to school, so it's interesting because I am originally from the UK, and I moved to Canada in 2012. And I went to university at the University of Toronto for English literature and French, so to a degree I do have a writing background. And then after that I did a master's in journalism, and so I do have a writing background, but I wasn't sure. I mean, I never knew I was gonna end up being a tabletop writer, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, but no, I don't have an acting background whatsoever.
I mean, I feel like, well, first of all, I can just say that you have a very soothing voice, so I can see why you would be a good fit for voice acting. I'm curious if there's been any crossover between your TTRPG writing, voice acting, and that kind of stuff. Have you done any work with... You said you have done some work for 5th edition and for D&D. Have you been able to mix those worlds at all?
Yes, I have. I wrote and voice acted for a character on a project. It's under NDA, so I can't talk about it fully yet. Sure. But yes, I have. I've had the opportunity to do that. It was really, really fun. I would love to do more of that, if possible.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience at PAX Unplugged. This is your first PAX Unplugged. Were there any games that really stood out to you, adventures or TTRPG stuff that you really loved? What kind of stuff has caught your eye at the convention?
Honestly, there's a whole lot of stuff. I did all my shopping yesterday, so I had the chance to pick up a hard copy of Heart because I'd only ever read it in a PDF. I picked up Dream Askew and Dream Apart. I also got Dialect, which I've been wanting to play for a while, and I got For the Queen as well. So I'm really excited about all of those games.
So we've talked a lot about TTRPGs, we've talked about voice acting, we've talked about modeling. Are there any hobbies that folks might be surprised that you're into, or things that aren't related to your work that you're actually very into?
Honestly, I do like to sing and I do like to draw, but neither of those things feature in my professional work because I am not a professional, but I do those things just casually for fun.
Have you drawn any of your D&D characters?
Yes, very badly.
Yeah, I feel like I always know what my characters look like, but when I try and tell an artist, like, I want it to be like this, it's harder to always communicate what you see in your head. Has there been something at the convention that you were surprised to find, or something that caught you off guard that you wanted to look up more or do more research on or explore more, maybe a game outside your comfort zone or something like that?
Honestly, yeah, there's a bunch of titles that are downstairs that I've heard of and that I couldn't buy because I don't have enough room in my suitcase. So there's definitely things that I'll be coming back for, certainly.
Before we wrap up, I would love to ask, a little more in detail about what your gaming experience has been in quarantine. You mentioned playing a lot of games online and what that was like. I know for a lot of folks, people discovered D&D in the pandemic. It was so easy to play on Zoom. And were there any really standout experiences during your quarantine that really helped you get through it while doing online gaming?
Honestly, getting familiar with virtual tabletop was a learning curve, but because I was already doing it for work, I was able to introduce my gaming groups to it, and that was actually a really helpful experience because now a lot of my professional life happens on that kind of space. So yes, to a degree.
I would love to give you an opportunity to tell folks where they can find you online, where they can check out the latest stuff that you're working on. If there's any projects that you're looking to plug, now would be a great time to tell the folks who are listening.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Sebastian Yue, so just my name and YUE, all one word. And that's pretty much the main place you can find me. There's a link on there to my link tree, which is everywhere else you can find me. I publish on Itch and I publish on DM's Guild, and I'm Sebastian Yue pretty much everywhere.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. We have a saying on the podcast. The saying is, music is life and life is good. It's this idea that as long as you're creating, even in really tough times, if you can fulfill yourself through art, it's not that bad. So if you could say, music is life and life is good, we'll wrap up the interview.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. Music is life and life is good.
Hey everyone, I am back one final time. This time I'm talking with Justin Gary of Stoneblade Entertainment, the CEO of the company and a game designer in his own right. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, very excited, man. It's been a great show.
So, have you been to PAX Unplugged before?
I have, yeah. I think this is my fourth time being here, so I love the show. The energy here, the people, just everybody is it's just such a great vibe of geek culture and joy of being here, and especially now coming off the pandemic, being able to just be in the same room and play tabletop games with people is just so much fun.
So you have a lot of games that are upcoming and coming soon, but before we get into all of that, you are the CEO and one of the game designers for this company. Talk a little bit about how you got to this point, right? I know as a kid, I didn't even know game design was a thing. Were you a board game fan growing up? Did you love board games since you were a kid?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's one of those things that it was a very windy path for me, and I like to talk about it now. I have my own game design podcast called Think Like a Game Designer. I like to talk about this path because for people that are out there that think that this is something they might want to do, it can be done. And so for me, I started off as a Magic Pro player. I won the U.S. National Championships when I was 17 and then traveled around the world, and that's how I paid my way through college, was playing Magic. And so that was obviously a huge part of it for me. But I didn't think of it even then as a career. I thought of it as kind of a fun way to just kind of do something on the side. I even went to law school because both my parents were lawyers. That's what I was supposed to do. And I spent a year miserable before, thank goodness, I had an opportunity to do an internship at Upper Deck Entertainment working on the Marvel vs. TC trading card game.
Oh, cool.
And I really just fell in love with it. And so I quit law school, moved across the country, started working on games, designed things like the World of Warcraft miniatures game and a bunch of other cool projects, and then eventually quit and started my own company and launched Ascension, and that was now over 11 years ago. And here I am today.
And Ascension was the first game that you launched under your company, yes?
That's correct. The very first game I launched. And honestly, it was another one of those that I did not expect to be successful. I basically had just all my life savings. I just put it into the game and was kind of joking that if it didn't sell, I was just going to have to build a house out of Ascension boxes and live out of that. But it just immediately took off. People loved it, and it really created that foundation for me to be able to kind of do what I do for a living.
And now you're at a point where you have a variety of versions of Ascension. It's not just one kind of game anymore. You have Ascension Tactics coming soon, as well as a pirate-themed version of Ascension. How do you figure out how to expand that world, right? It's got its own lore and building, and there are things it's got to be Ascension, right? So there are things that need to stay true to the original, but you also want to innovate and change it to make it something new for new players as well.
Yeah, you know what's really funny? The last time I was at PAX 2 years ago, I gave a talk on this exact subject, right? It's called How Do You Make a Game That Lasts? How to Make Games That Last. And I have a recording of it that I'm making access to people that are in my online course. If any people join my email list, either at stoneblade.com or justingary.com, I'll be sending that out in January. But the short version, for the purpose of this podcast, is you need to know what is the core tension of your game, right? What's at the heart of it? What's the thing that is the central component? And then from there, once you know what that is, you can expand in a lot of different ways, so long as whatever you're expanding on adds to or creates a parallel tension to that core tension, right? And the same is true regardless of what you're doing, right? Like, when you talk about a band that's making a second album, right? They have their first album is a really big hit. They make a second album. If it's too similar to the first one, it's just washed up, same thing. And if it's too different, then, they've sold out or they're not the same. They've lost their fans, right? Same thing is true in game design, right? And so for Ascension, the core tension of it is that there's a 6-card center row that's always changing. And it's a deck building game, so you're trying to build your deck and make it better. And the fact that the cards that I take will deny them to you and vice versa, and I want to pay attention to the ones you need versus the ones I need and reacting to what's going on, that's the heart of it, right? And it's the frustration of, I'm so close to getting what I want, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And so every single mechanic, and we've done 16 Ascension expansions, that not counting like collector's editions and stuff, and Ascension Tactics, which takes the exact same heart of Ascension and adds an entire tactical miniatures game that you play using the same cards. And all of that stuff, we're able to explore and move to different zones because I know where the core tension is, and I know that each of the new mechanics, each of the new elements has got to play into that. And so that's one of the most important things when you're expanding a game for years and years to come.
So anyone who knows you knows how much you love cards. You just mentioned that you grew up playing Magic. You're doing something a little different with a new game that's coming soon that I think I would love for you to talk about, because it's the first time I've ever heard this kind of concept for creating a card-based game.
Yeah, so this is something I'm super excited about. So even to reference, just for me, like to geek out for a second, so we're talking about Soulforge Fusion, and it's a game that I co-created with Richard Garfield, the guy that created Magic, which dictated the whole course of my life, right? So just being able to work with him has been a dream come true. But one of the things that Richard is always focused on, and I love to be focused on, is always like, what's next, right? He's already created the most successful trading card game in the world. He doesn't just want to make another trading card game. And so what we did was we created what we're calling a hybrid deck game. And what that means is we've created a custom algorithm that generates decks out of basically, so every single deck is going to be unique, and you can take any 2 decks that you want and combine them together to make your playable deck. So it's a pool of over 15,000 cards in set 1, more possible unique decks than there are atoms in the universe, and you can pick any 2 of them that you want to shuffle up and play, and then the gameplay itself is something we made an original version of this called Soulforge back in 2012 as a pure digital game, and it uses the same kind of core mechanics of that. Whenever you play a card, that card levels up, and you get the higher level version to your deck. You cycle through. It's like you're attacking in lane-based combat, trying to take the other person out. Like it takes like the heart of a great game that we made many years ago and brings new technology into it, and to make something that's truly revolutionary. Oh, and on top of that, each deck will have its own unique numbering and QR code. You can scan it to add it to your online collection, and then we have a tool that lets you play in Tabletop Simulator. So we'll be running tournaments, organized play in your local game store, but if you don't have a local game store near you or you don't want to go out that day, you can still play online with your exact deck and still participate.
That's brilliant. Like something that I'd always had conflict with Magic Online and other versions of online card games, especially with Tabletop Simulator, which is a great program and has a great audience, is that there isn't always an official way to play some of your favorite games. And also if you buy cards, like the hardest thing is, well, if I buy Magic cards and then I want those cards in Magic Online, I got to buy them again. This, I think, is such a brilliant way to kind of collaborate on that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about just pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Like, I love tabletop gaming. I'm never gonna that's always going to be where my heart is. The ability to sit around and play games together. But the conveniences of online play are no joke, right? Yeah. Even with Ascension, right? For anybody that's interested in Ascension and is not familiar with it, there's a free app you can download, iOS, Android. You can play the game absolutely for free. Expansions cost like a couple of dollars, and you can play in 5 minutes, play with your friends around the world. Like, you can't do that with a physical box game. And so I've always appreciated that there's a synergistic, symbiotic relationship between the two. And so Soulforge Fusion just takes that to the next level, where literally the very same deck of cards that you have, that you purchased, you can now play online, and nobody else can because you're the only one that has it. I think there's something really exciting about that.
So let's talk a little bit about your masterclass, because I think it's really interesting. Like, of course, we hear masterclasses with Steve Martin and Penn and Teller and like all of these people who are entertainers known around the world. But something like game design is something that I, even as a podcaster who has a video game podcast, has talked to other game designers, is not something I always saw the forest for the trees in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
You don't think about someone made this thing.
Right.
And I feel like the internet age has made it so much more obvious to find those kinds of people and see behind the scenes. What can people, if they take your class, can they expect? Give like a little, I guess, tease or trailer about like the kinds of things that you're teaching in this class if people want to learn more about game design.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so the reason I went down this path is because I kind of told you the abbreviated version of my origin story, right? But I didn't tell you about like the terror and uncertainty that came at each phase, right? I was good at playing games from an early age and, did well in Magic tournaments, but that's not the same thing as being good at making games. And so when I started working as a game designer, I had no idea what I was doing. And I had to just figure it out on the fly. And I read all different books on creativity and principles for design, and I talked to other smart people, and I had to piece this together. And it was a very painful process. And so I wanted to make it easier for other people. And so the first thing I did was I wrote a book called Think Like a Game Designer and made that and launched that with all the core principles of like, what are the fundamentals of design? What is the core design loop? What are the phases of design? How do you know when you're done? How do you get feedback properly? How do you process that feedback? All that stuff broken down step-by-step instructions. And then I made a podcast, same name, where I talk to the best designers in the world. Like, I kid you not, the people that are the foundation stones. Of course, I talked to Richard Garfield, and I talked to Peter Atkinson, who created Magic, and I talked to every one of the people that like has laid the foundation. John Zinzer, who created AEG, and Eric Lang, like all the top designers in the space, and just so you can hear the kinds of principles and how they break down. And that's been great because those are the kinds of conversations that I would have for fun anyway, because I'm friends with a lot of these people, but now we let other people in on it. And so the masterclass was designed to really, for people who are really ready to commit and want to get things done, because while I'm happy to give you the information away for free, there's a difference between having information and acting. And when it comes to game design, there is no substitute for taking action. And the great thing about the masterclass is, unlike the kind of traditional masterclass thing, it's a class that you run with other people. And so you have got a community of people that are all on Discord. You've got things to do. You've got deadlines to meet. You've got accountability and a community that makes things come together. And in addition, because it's a class, I've been able to record enough videos and answer enough questions over time that I go not only into the principles of design, like how do you go from idea to finished product, but also how do you kickstart? How do you pitch to a publisher? We actually even have publisher pitch sessions that we organize for the students so they can actually get live pitches to happen at the end of the class with their games. All the different kinds of things. How do you find artists? How do you manage artists? How do you do? So like we are able to go like very, very deep in all of the things that come with I want to go from I love games to I have a game on the shelf somewhere. And so that's been really fun to be able to deep dive and just to be one-on-one interacting with everybody. Like we hired students from the games. We've purchased some of their games from the class too. And so it's been really exciting just to have that enthusiasm, and you just can't underestimate the importance of having a great community of people to play test, to give you feedback, to push you. And so that's what's really exciting about the course.
Something I want to ask, because something that always fascinates me is growing up as a nerd, there are always things that you get to experience that you never think you will. Like for me this weekend, I got to meet Mark Meir, who's not only a famous TTRPG player, but I have a Mass Effect podcast, and he is the voice of Commander Shepard. To get to tell someone like that like I've spent thousands of hours with you, thank you for giving me this world.
Yeah.
I want to ask, if you could talk to like 10-year-old, 13-year-old you, 17-year-old you, what is the craziest thing that you've been able to experience through your job and making games that you never thought possible?
Oh man, it's so much. I already kind of mentioned like getting to work with Richard Garfield, right? Like, so when I discovered Magic and how that impacted me, to being able to be like a peer of his and work with him and work through problems together is amazing. So I'm going to come up with a different answer because that's the first one that comes to mind. I'm going to come up with a different answer because I already talked about that earlier. So to me, some of the stuff that I've been able to do that really like touches people's hearts in a way that I didn't expect is something that really keeps me going, right? So we've had people who have gotten, we have actually a famous video of called a very game of proposal. Someone proposed over a game of Ascension. Like we made a custom promo card for them to reveal during the game to then give the proposal. Like we have people get tattoos of our games. We've had wedding cake toppers. We've had like fathers and sons that come and say like we were able to bond and connect over your games, and that sort of stuff just like fills me with a joy and satisfaction that I just didn't even know was possible. Like I can just like, it is literally my job to spread joy, connection, and inspiration. That's what I do every single day, and it's what keeps me going. And so it's been, as much as there's being able to work with these incredible icons and the people who brought me so much joy has been, and I can just rattle off a list of those names, that's amazing. But now to know that I'm able to do that for other people is really the joy of my life.
I really love that. This is a question that I like to ask because it's not so simple to answer. Obviously, you have a ton of really great games. You have a plan, things you want to make, things coming out in Q1 of 2022. What does the future of Ascension and the future of your whole company look like? What do you see as the future of tabletop gaming, or the next thing that you would love to see either accomplished by others in collaboration or just even by you and your company?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it's really, you're right, it is a hard question to answer, but I think, like, I'm doing my best to craft that future right now. Like, that's what, all the things I talked about with SoulForge Fusion, like, nobody's ever done this before, right? There's been other games that have done algorithmic generation, but nobody that's done the card generation that we have, nobody that's done the hybridizing so that you have it in physical and digital. I think there's a lot of really exciting territory to move forward in, and it's something actually, for me, it's been a mission of mine for 15 years to find that right bridge between physical and digital, to make something that really uses both and each enhances the other. There's a lot of games that'll use like a little phone app or the alternate reality, like hold your phone up and see things come alive, and those things are cool, but so far they've been largely gimmicky, right? I mean, we have a virtual reality version of Ascension you can play and download on Steam. We have the mobile version, we have the all these different kinds of things, and so to me, how do you get the best parts of the digital things, or the fact that it can do all the bookkeeping for you, the fact that it can make some magical things happen, the fact that it can give you more options and uncertainty with the fun and joy of tabletop games, the physicality, the being next to people and seeing them in real life, the strategy and kind of like fully understandable components that come from playing a game, the feel and excitement of rolling dice. I want to see the community and game design in general evolve along those lines, and so that's a lot of what I'm trying to do with pushing things along on my side too.
As a Magic fan, I want to ask you one question. Do you have a favorite Magic card, and if you do, what is it?
Well, I got to design my own Magic card, and it was included in one of the sets as a real honor of mine. But I won't pick that one because that's too cheesy, and it's not really my favorite. I mean, so I won the most money with Oath of Druids in tournament wins, and so that one was really great for me, which let me just kind of. But I think to me, the card that really kind of blew my mind open, and I really enjoyed. Just from a visceral standpoint, was Force of Will. And it's because I am intrinsically a control player, and I apologize to all my opponents because I just want to make sure they crush their will and have absolute lockdown on the game. There's no hope for you, and then eventually I'll kill you. And the idea that you could have the whole game is based around the mana system, and the fact that it suddenly broke out of that concept, and now you could pay with other things and have this uncertainty of maybe they could do something, maybe they couldn't. There was something just really cool and magical about that. So that'll be the answer I give now, even though there's a lot of options that I could.
I was like, something like that could change depending on the day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I would love for you to tell folks where they can find you online, find your company online, and what you want to direct them towards, what you want them to check out.
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning about game design and you want to have access to any of the tools, including the free stuff like the podcast, go to thinklikeagamedesigner.com and you can sign up for the email list there. If you're interested in any of the awesome games that I've talked about and you want to build and play any of those, stoneblade.com, and all the games are available there, physical, digital. You can sign up for the email list there to be the first ones to know about cool new stuff that's coming out. And depending upon when this podcast comes out, there's a late back option for SoulForge Fusion, which you can just find at stoneblade.com/SoulForge, SOLFORGE.
Amazing. Justin, thank you for taking the time. The last thing I'll ask you to do is we have a saying on this podcast. The saying is music is life and life is good. It's born out of my music podcast. It's this idea that as long as you're creating, as long as you are pursuing your passion, even when life gets hard, it's not that bad because you're fulfilling your heart. So if you could say that for me right now, we'll end the interview.
Music is life and life is good.
That's it for this episode of CPOV Autographs. Our theme music is by Michael Kill. Our logo was designed by Case Aiken and Joey Amons. If you liked the show, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to help us reach more listeners. Questions, comments, or guest recommendations? Email mr.matt.storm@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at CPOV Autographs. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not...
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're all Screen Beans now.
She will be mine.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.